The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster by, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. We're open line through till 1, so on this gorgeous Friday lunchtime, time to have your say. Call 66 13 68, text 166 177, WhatsApp same number 166 177. You will need to put us into your contacts. Call 66 13 68, and the email address is studio@manxradio.com. Out of hours, as it were. Email for the show is manninline@manxradio.com, but while we're on the air, the studio at manxradio.com, and the emails go straight into the inbox that I'm looking at right now. By the way, before we get it underway, can I tell you, after Mannin Line today, because it's Friday and it's our 60th anniversary year, an absolute treat for you, a real treat and a real Manx character. Going to have an archive recording of Paul Leberginski, the renowned island poet. Paul will be on from beyond the grave. He's no longer with us, reciting some of his work. That's Paul Leberginski after Mannin Line today in our archive year. And Howard's with us today. Hi, Howard.
Hello, Andy. Just thought I'd get in early, give people a chance to have a chunter. But it's old news as regards what you've been putting on recent, but the final cost of Liverpool Ferry Terminal still unknown.
Yes.
The second liner says a figure expected 65 weeks after construction completion. Now, when do they officially say it's complete? And if you work out 65 weeks and they keep sliding the date to start that from, we're going to be in 2025 well and truly, which means it's election year. And at that point then, it'll get to the system or the situation where they'll say it's too late to be discussing it and we leave this to the new Parliament. In other words, they'll come in. There could be some green grass in there. There might not be, but there could be. And they won't be able to discuss this because they're not knowledgeable. But what I would like an answer for, and it's been always on my mind, when this was first started, the ferry terminal suggested the workings, the paperwork, the legal side of it. Who was in charge of all that within government? Not necessarily the minister, because we've had about 3 or 4 of them. They come in once a week. But who was in charge of this in the government? Because if I remember, just after the COVID and everything sort of settled down a bit afterwards, the chief executive officer of the DOI resigned abruptly as instantly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Attorney General, he went the same way, and there was somebody else from the hierarchy, all bailed out at the same time. Now, it begs to make you wonder, did they know what the situation was? Do they know who signed this project off? It was an open-ended project. It was a license to print money for the construction companies. And the taxpayers are the ones who's paying it.
Well, I'm sure, Howard, that within government, within the civil service and the administration and the bureaucracy, they know exactly who signed it off, and they know whether it was one person or whether it was a group of people or a committee. Somebody somewhere, as you say, put a tick in the box, and the concrete started to be mixed and the diggers went in there. Yeah. As yet, we're not privy to that information. The public is, at the moment doesn't. I mean, we've been handed the bill, but we just don't know everything else.
Well, would you pay a bill for work on your car if it wasn't itemised and signed off by the person that had done it? No. So why should the government, our government, who don't have any money of their own, they're dealing with our money, they are the processors of the system, not the payers. We are the payers. And why are they kicking this into the long grass? And why was there such a long, final date for the costs to be known?
Well, apparently this is what they call it, a target cost contract, where the contractor estimates what it's going to cost, and then there's overhead, preliminaries, and then adjustments are basically what they call compensation events. So basically everybody's going to argue the toss afterwards.
Yes, but the clowns, or some of the clowns that we've got there dealing with this, are rank amateurs, because they are not au fait with building construction. They're not au fait with financial sector side of it. This is why we have high-ranking civil servants who are supposed to be in that position. Yeah. But the head of the DOI at the time, Nick Black, he left his position, boink, straight out, no F's, buts, or otherwise, I'm going. Why? And it makes you wonder whether he knew this smelly brown stuff was going to be hitting the fan in the future.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, I don't know whether you remember, of course it was during the Quayle administration, everybody wanted the new sea terminal built. Lots of people were arguing about where it should be, whether it should be further down, precisely where it should be. But I mean, there was a kind of impetus, there was a momentum that said that we need this darn thing done. We're being booted off our space because Liverpool Council want to put in cruise liners, so we need to get something done as soon as possible.
Well, there used to always be cruise lines there, and I can remember when the Manx boats, as we termed them, the steam packet, the Manx boats used to come in on the Prince's Dock, and I remember getting off those ships, going up front of the old viaducts, etc., and there was cruise ships berthed just downside. Yeah. Admittedly, they might have been smaller, but they were cruise ships nonetheless. And alongside the pier head, as it was, there was a huge warehouse, and the trains used to go right down into that to take the passengers back to the cruise ships. That was also used at the time in inclement weather for the steam packet. You could go and hide in there, and it was like a big barn, essentially. But I don't disagree with the fact that it was needed, because we didn't have a lot of options. It was moving from Prince's Dock or moving out altogether. But the fact that they've gone and passed on a huge debt that's going to have to be paid eventually, and there's nothing saying they're quoting 70 to 75 million, just like it's 2.5 pence to go down the road for an ice cream. But this is serious money that's got to come from the Manx government, from the Manx people, and this little upset this weekend or last weekend when they shut the sea terminal. Is a similar situation going to happen in Liverpool, where the ferries are cancelled or delayed or whatever, and this place in Liverpool is going to shut down at 6 o'clock the same? Now,
that's a really good point, Howard, because as part of the contract, as far as I remember it, they're not allowed to have ferry movements after 11 o'clock at night. Now, perhaps they can vary them, but I think they need to make it very clear what's going to happen to that ferry terminal out of hours, and if people are going to get left in the lurch. There's nowhere around. I mean, literally, there's nothing around there apart from very expensive flats and apartments and the new Everton football ground. There's nowhere where people can stay.
No. And if that's the case, if you don't have a mobile phone and a taxi phone number, they're saying they're putting buses on, but I don't know what time those buses will be running. The Liverpool Corporation are putting a bus service on down there. It's supposed to be starting soon on a regular basis, but that's not to say it'll be running after the ferry departures. So if you don't know a taxi number off the back of your hand, it's a half-mile walk just to get into Liverpool before you start wandering around looking for hotels.
If it's good weather. I mean, if it's blowing a hoolie, exactly. You're right next to the River Mersey.
Exactly. So this, fine. I'm not saying that the terminal was not needed, because it was pitiful where you used to go down onto the dockside and where you were in that cabins, etc. It needed something better, and we have something better, but I would like to know who actually agreed this contract and the fact is, on the other side, who signed the other half? It takes two people to make a contract, and who were they? And why can't the government come straight? And why is it necessary, or was it necessary, to have this waiting time of over a year, about 14 months after construction's completion? And I haven't heard anything saying that it's actually complete and signed off yet.
So, Howard, I mean, bearing in mind we are where we are, if everybody badgers away and picks away at this, and the government turn around and say, we'll have an inquiry, we'll have a report, two things guaranteed, they're both going to cost money, and we're going to be no further forward. Is it time to leave all this behind and move on, or do we need to get to the bottom of it?
Get to the bottom of it. That's what the government are being paid for, is to look after the taxpayers' interests. And if somebody walked into your house and stole something, you'd want to know the reason why, and that is exactly what's happening here. There has been something dreadfully wrong in the system that has left it to be an open-ended contract. A lot of people won't remember, but when the town council, Douglas Council, built Port Sodrick, the one that's just been knocked down now, I know the company that was doing it, and the corporation had a contract, a fixed-term contract, price contract, but during that contract, work had to be done to the rock face behind where they were building. And that then went outside the contract, and the company that was building it was able, and rightly so at the time, to add money to the price of the building where they had to do maintenance on the rock face. But this here is... I just can't believe that the government have been so stupid. And that is the word, and used politely. But I would like to know, and I would like an honest answer, which is, I don't think will ever be forthcoming, who signed this off? Whose name is on the bottom of the contract? And who was the instigator of it?
Okay, and then what, Howard? I mean, what do you do then? Let's just say that, X person or Y person is there. I mean, apart from embarrassing the hell out of them, what do we get out of it? We don't get any money.
Well, we get an answer to it, but you can. There are lawyers out there. Well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a taxpayer, and my money is being wasted hand over fist. But there are lawyers out there that can take these people to task. They're not made of Teflon. Things do stick to them.
Okay.
And there's time that things started to stick, because over the last 20 years, there are hundreds of thousands of pounds that's been misused, shall we say.
Okay.
The power station is a classic example. The £100 million plus for the Iris scheme. The promenade, we will never know the full truth behind that. We've got the ferry terminal in Liverpool, and millions at the airport. All government spends, and nobody seems to question it. Well, it's time these people were questioned, and given a court of inquiry if necessary.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you the truth about the promenade. I'll tell you what the truth is, Howard.
Go on.
It's not finished.
Oh, it is. It's knackered. Right. It's more than not finished.
Anyway, apart from that, it's going to be a nice weekend. I take it the Camera Obscura's open tomorrow and Sunday.
Yep, and I'll be up there at the crack of dawn on Sunday morning, opening up, hopefully.
Okay. Have a good weekend, Howard.
Take care. Thanks, then.
Good to hear
Bye
from
now.
you. I mentioned yesterday about that Shetland Islands have now got 103 wind turbines, and they're now supplying the UK grid. I don't know whether you saw the reports yesterday on the news. Interesting, but apparently I got a note in from 313 said, well, Shetland have now got 103 wind, big things as well, big things, but their electricity is no cheaper. I wonder if the MUA can give us a forecast of our future costs per kilowatt hour. Well, we are at 29p per kilowatt hour at the moment. It'll be nice to know what's going to happen in the future. And with our friends at Ørsted, if they're going to be renting our seabed, we still don't know how much they're going to pay for the seabed. And we don't know whether there's a quid pro quo regarding electricity, which obviously there is a plan for another interconnector to come in just around Groudle, from Preston to Groudle. Apparently, the total cost of the Liverpool ferry terminal has come out over £100 million. Fred, do you know that for certain? Absolutely for certain. At the moment, they're saying 70 to 75 million. I mean, it started off about 35 million now. So, but once you, I just wonder whether, when you start to get into those sort of figures, again, people's eyes glaze over, and it's just money in the end, isn't it? It's a number, it's pieces of paper. But in the end, it's our tax revenues. And thanks to 974, just to clear a couple of points up, of course, election year is 2026, September 2026. So we'll know next year possibly how much the Liverpool ferry terminal has cost, Princess Half Tide Dock. And regarding the Attorney General did disappear. Sadly, he passed away. I insist on a quotation, and I only pay on satisfactory completion, says David H. Well, this is when Tim Crookall, MHK, the minister, said in Tynwald that adjustments to the target cost can occur during the contract project through compensation events. Compensation events, i.e. arguing about who's done what and to whom and who's responsible for it. But we'll find out. I'm sure we will know, but just come back to my question. I wonder, you've got an opinion on this. Is there a point on keep on digging and digging and digging to hold people personally culpable? Now, presumably, if anybody was involved in the decision and has now left the employ of the government, they've got an exit agreement. They'll have an agreement to say, presumably, confidentiality agreement to say that they're not going to say anything about it, and the government won't pursue it anymore. You would assume. Remember, says 510, every day we have people calling MHK's clowns and what have you, thinking that they can run the Isle of Man. But there is an election in just over 2 years' time. So perhaps now is the time for anybody who's got political ambitions to step forward, start making a few preliminary investigations into whether or not they could do it. Just a thought. There needs to be a police investigation into the Liverpool ferry fiasco, says 762. Well, police investigation, Francesca Frankie, would mean that there's something criminal. And nobody's suggesting that there's been anything criminal. There's just been a bit of a cock-up, really, on the price. So unless you have something absolutely firm on that front, I think it's best to keep your powder dry. There's also the fact you can get an Uber app on the mobile phone for the taxis in Liverpool and most of the UK. No need to know telephone numbers, says Peter. But it would be nice to know, Peter, if you are stuck at the Liverpool Half Tide Dock, if you are stuck at the ferry terminal, they're not going to close the darn thing. By the way, a statement came in yesterday regarding Monday night's Mannin sailing between Douglas and Liverpool, which was cancelled by the ship's captain because of bad weather. This official statement, I'll tell you what they've had to say. The decision was communicated to those booked to travel on the sailing 3 hours before the scheduled departure. In the event of weather-affected sailings, it's the passenger's responsibility to make alternative accommodation arrangements. Get that? In the event of weather-affected sailings, passengers' responsibility. This is from the department. The steam packet advised local passengers to go home and visiting passengers who've been staying with family, friends or businesses to return to their accommodation if possible or find alternative accommodation. On this occasion, travellers had the time to make overnight arrangements and plenty of accommodation was available on the Isle of Man. Steam packet helped passengers to rearrange their sailings. And the department says it's government policy to close the Sea Terminal building after the last sailing of the day. There are emergency plans in place to open the building in exceptional situations if there's no accommodation available on the Isle of Man. However, on this occasion, there was sufficient notice given the cancellation and there was accommodation available. We know how challenging it can be to find a place to stay unexpectedly, and we encourage everybody to consider travel insurance that includes cover for unforeseen circumstances. This is the department's view. This is their statement. It was pleasing to hear of a local business helping passengers during this difficult time, and the government appreciates the discomfort felt by those affected by travel disruptions and hope the passengers still had an enjoyable visit to the Isle of Man. That's the government's view about what happened. They hope they had a nice time. And that's that. David's with us now. Hi, David.
Hi, Randy. I just want to have a quick word. I've noticed there's activity now on the promenade where the scaffolding is, where the stable block is, and where the registered buildings are. So my concern is, what are they actually doing? And normally if it's a registered building, they'd have to put a set of plans together to say, we're going to do this, we're going to put a prop here, we're going to fill a wall in here, we're going to put antique timbers in this side. I just wonder what's happening, because on the other side of the coin, the owner of the nuisance site has been put through hoops on all sorts, and there's government getting away with it. And just regarding the contract, as I said to you before, none of the politicians have said what was the contract for any government work and what were the variations to the contract and who signed them off. I've never heard of a target contract. There are multi-million pound contracts that you sign up. They would have gone through the AG's office, originally signed off by the AG himself probably, and the minister at the time, and I don't think it was Tim at the time that probably signed that off, so he can't be held responsible for that. But we've even got the Public Accounts Committee. What have they been doing also?
And didn't they appoint an Auditor General? Haven't we got somebody called the Auditor General now who's going to be looking at stuff like that?
Yes, but you've got to somebody has to make the complaint and have evidence. And it's, I but I've dragged things out as well. But you never get answers when you're asked departments. They're so clammed up. We can't discuss it. We're an arm's length contractor. The housing board, the steam packet. They need to get those ducks in order to say that the general public needs answers on where their money is being spent.
Well, you would have thought, as you say, I mean, the public purse is surely sacrosanct. I mean, it is. I'm not saying it's holy, but I mean, when you're dealing with public money, surely standards have to be high. Yes.
Now, you remember that when they were doing the docks, and they suddenly found out there were bombs there. Now, any contract that's working in, say, particularly this one, Liverpool is, which we're in the war, there's bound to be ammunitions. We found some at the chasms the other week, didn't we?
That's it, yeah.
And they were dealt with by the army or whatever came along and dealt with it. So you would have think the contract would have said, we're building a new terminal in Liverpool. The risks are we might find artifacts, we might find an old building, we might find gold, or we might find trophies. But wouldn't we find bombs? I think the tick box to that would have been yes. And wouldn't you have done a survey? That's what surveyors are for.
Well, I mean, as I say, I don't know. I like to look forward. So if we find out, things were done or could have been done better, what's in it for the public? I mean, we're not going to get any money back. That's absolutely obvious. So is it worth digging and digging and digging?
This is the interesting bit is where the Public Accounts Committee within government, and the chairman's there, and then there's members on it as well, investigate things and have power to investigate, and can bring people in and say, what's this contract about? Why didn't you use the other contract, the ABC contract or whatever, and say to him, well, how much you authorised the variations to the contract, and didn't you survey that might have been bombs there?
Right.
Yeah. It's simple stuff. And there must be a manual somewhere in construction and architects. But don't forget, like you say before, there's no good fighting at the end too much, because at the end of the day, it just costs lawyers, doesn't it?
Of course, and they're the people who will make the accountants and the lawyers and people like that. They'll make all the money. We'll still be paying out for them.
Yeah, and just to cover myself, there are good lawyers out there too, all right?
All right. Have a good weekend.
See you, bye.
Cheers. Now, 29 minutes before 1. And a note in from 109 just saying, yes, you should hold people to account because in the future they'll be less inclined to waste taxpayers' money. They should be held accountable. They'd soon be moaning if we stop paying taxes. Just a thought, says 602. Oh, you know what? What happens if you go down that road? I'm getting disappointed with a lot of government decisions, mistakes, especially when it takes a freedom of information request to get simple answers. They must think the public's stupid. Thank you, says Tony, 538. I just come back to the point, and I absolutely guarantee in a little over 2 years' time, when we're in the run-up to the general election, everybody, absolutely everybody, will be not only talking about sustainability and green issues and energy and this, that and the other, but also about transparency. Government must be transparent. The people need to know what's happening. Well, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Ian said Howard's made some excellent points, and in answer to your question, what can we do about it if we need answers as to why this debacle happened, and the responsibility needs to be seen and taken by those involved. I stand by what I've said before, that we should have looked at other options other than Liverpool. I think Liverpool, quite frankly, have taken the Isle of Man government for fools, says Ian. And Jill said, does anybody think the DOI has a full disclosure problem? 929 passengers used a service in a year. They forgot to mention it only ran for 24 days. Is this about the Craignish bus service, is it? Disgraceful manipulation of figures, says Jill in Oncombe. I got some messages in the other day, and we haven't talked about this, and it is about vaping. And some figures came out earlier on this week, and this is British figures, but apparently 10% of adults, 1 in 10 adults in Britain uses a vape, and it's going up. The use of vapes, apparently 11% of the UK population uses e-cigarettes, 5.6 million. Now, experts are saying that vaping is less harmful than smoking cigarettes, but it isn't risk-free and should only be used as an aid to quit, i.e. a road away from smoking, not a pathway into smoking. But we know that more and more youngsters are vaping, and that could be a pathway into smoking. So is there something we can do on the Isle of Man? I only mention this because next Wednesday, the new academic year starts. So children, young children, will be going back to school next Wednesday. And we know if you walk around schools, if you live near schools, you know that teenagers are now vaping on the Isle of Man. And next Wednesday could be day one of a new recruitment drive for the people selling or promoting vapes. If you're a parent or a guardian, do you have a thought?
The Loganair September sale is now on. Fly from the Isle of Man and save up to 15% off over 1 million seats across the Loganair network. Book by 6 p.m. on 8th September. Travel from 1st October. Subject to availability, exclusions apply. Visit loganair.co.uk. Use promo code SEPT15. Loganair. Your journey, our joy.
Construction waste today.
Tells recycle for another day.
A builder skip or two.
Tells Skips will bring to you.
At Tells Skip Hire and Waste Disposal in Snugborough, you only pay for the waste you bring. For waste disposal and skips, give us a call on 677 137. That's 677 137. Visit Tells today or find Tells Limited on Facebook.
Call Tells Skips today.
677 137.
The Heroes of Man Awards, brought to you by A Little Piece of Hope charity. Nominations recognising and awarding local children's champions on the Isle of Man are now open. Nominations close Saturday the 31st of August. For more information on how you can nominate your hero or heroes, go to alittlepieceofhope.com and nominate a Hero of Man today. That's alittlepieceofhope.com. The Heroes of Man Awards are taking place on the 16th of November at the Palace Hotel, Douglas Promenade at 6:30 p.m. This advert has been supported by Cayman National Bank in the Isle of Man, rewarding relationships built on trust, and your nation's station, Manx Radio.
As Gilg Nera.
A Gilg, the Manx Gaelic, Ginian Amera, the mother tongue of Elian Vannin, the Isle of Man. You can catch up with more of Manx Radio's Manx language programmes in the weekly podcast Abershen Rish. Say that again. Shene, that's the one.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Fast am I, 24 minutes now before 1, Friday lunchtime, live from Douglas in the Isle of Man. And by the way, if you haven't yet checked out our podcast service, everything that's ever been broadcast, well, almost, is available. Go to manxradio.com. There's a Listen Again facility and also the podcast. Listen Again, it lasts about a week, but then podcast you can listen to forever. And there are lots and lots of Manx people all around the world. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, I thank you. Lots of Manx people listen to Mannin Line all the time. It's absolutely fab. I've never come across anything like it before in my life. But we have listeners all over the world, Manxes and people who are just interested in the Isle of Man. So if you're listening to this any time of day or night, anywhere in the world, thank you. We appreciate it. While we're talking incompetence, who allowed the slaughtermen at the meat plant to go on holiday at the same time? This caused another backlog for receiving cattle to the plant, hence more problems for the farmers. The people running the plant are going to be the cause of this closing down, says Marie. We need to get to the bottom of this. And regarding, David said, regarding the new Liverpool ferry terminal, I never understood why we're paying anything for its construction. Surely if Liverpool Council or the Port Authority wanted the steam packet berth for other purposes, they should have provided the new facility and then charged us rent for its use. Well, the Port Authority, the Mersey Docks and Harbour Board, was purchased by the Peel Group. Of course, the boss, the owner, is based on the Isle of Man, but the Peel Group is enormous. I mean, it is. They had the Manchester Ship Canal, the Trafford Centre, and what have you. I think Media City in Manchester is partly owned by them as well. So, I mean, they're a huge, huge company and a very successful one. So, I don't know the theory behind that, David, whether or not we should. The trouble is that we can retrofit these arguments for hours and hours and hours. We are where we are. We're in the hole for at least 75 million pounds, and we don't quite know how much it's going to cost in the future. So what's the positive in this? Is there any positive, anything that we can do out of this pile of rubbish that is going to help us for the future? I mean, we can argue the toss for hours and hours and days and months, but it won't get us anywhere. We need to do something that will get us somewhere that we can learn for the future. The government said the passengers had 3 hours notice, but seem oblivious to the fact they had 3 hours notice to assist people. It depends which way you look at it, you see. Hey, Julian's on now. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. What a beautiful day.
Isn't it gorgeous? And a bit still as well, isn't it?
Yeah. That's I think it's that calm. Hopefully the boat will go then, and the aeroplane, and all our communications things. Hopefully no other reasons to cancel any connections.
Let's hope so.
Just remind me, Moor Vannin, the Ørsted offshore wind farm.
Yeah.
That's currently in a consultancy phase, I think, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And they're submitting a planning application in spring of 2025 to DEFRA, I believe, according to their website.
Okay.
If that's the case, it's kind of still up in the air a bit, isn't it? Because they're asking us, and they haven't submitted any planning application. So I'm just wondering why JobTrain is advertising for an Isle of Man offshore commercial director earning up to £80,000 a year, steering the renewable energy sector and managing offshore and marine development on the Isle of Man, and also looking for new renewable energy opportunities. Isn't that a bit precipitate, advertising for somebody to do that when we haven't even finished the consultancy yet and asking us our opinion?
They probably call it forward planning.
Funny that, isn't it?
Well, they're a big company. I mean, they've done all this before, and presumably they know what they need to do. And I mean, put it this way: they haven't put the planning application in hoping it'll fail. They hope it's going to work for them.
Yeah, but advertising, 80 grand of taxpayers' money for an official now. I mean, surely you'd advertise for something like that if and when we grant permission for planning and the fact that, we're happy that we're not going to have a repeat of Nantucket, which is still having problems since July the 13th with glass fibre all over the place.
Well, we don't know at the moment. I mean, nobody said. Presumably, Ørsted and the government know how much they're planning to pay us in rent for our seabed. So, presumably, the government knows how much possibly we'll get in revenue.
Well, I mean, at the moment, there's no way to know that figure, and it doesn't appear to be forthcoming at any time. We also don't even know what size the turbines for sure are going to be. I mean, the turbines that are being put in, or were until they were stopped off Nantucket, they're a fairly standard General Electric big ones, which have been going for a while. And there's been 3 of those in recent times where the blades have detached. And, of course, now they've got glass fibre shards all over the place. A scientist has actually weighed in and said that oil slicks tend to disperse, as they're natural. They tend to disperse in months, maybe years, depending on whether it's light or heavy crude. But he's also saying that glass fibre is thousands of years to millions of years, perhaps even never, that it will actually decompose.
I mean, do you think, I've heard some tell of this, about the fact that in the future because apparently they're working on how to recycle glass fibre. Obviously, glass fibre has been around for 80 odd years, and it's made, specifically to be very strong and very light. But as you say, recycling glass fibre is the devil's only job. So at some point, I mean, clever people devise clever things. Surely at some point they'll get to a point where they can recycle glass fibre.
I think another of their concerns, though, which would be an issue here, is that the right whale is obviously that's their grounds there, and they're baleen feeders, so they're using those plates to sieve the water out and eat their food. And of course, we've got the basking sharks here as well.
Yeah.
So you've got potentially 300 blades whizzing around, and don't forget the 389 meter turbines that they're talking about putting in. They're still on the test bed. I mean, we might be like a test for a new kind of turbine that's literally 40% bigger than the existing huge ones. So, you've got this, the existing ones are obviously snapping, otherwise it wouldn't happen. And you're talking about, I mean, at the moment, I saw I think it's Sanyi, the Chinese big 389 meter ones, they've literally got this big area with a blade being flexed, whatever they do to test it. I mean, it's literally like, an experimental car or something at the moment, and they're talking about putting these things in a few short years. But I just find it interesting that an 80,000 quid job for offshore commercial director is being put in now. I mean, that kind of reflects that they think it's a done deal or something.
Well, it may be that they know full well that there's a work permit system on the Isle of Man. So it may be that if somebody from off the Isle of Man applies for it, they'd have to apply for a work permit, and that could take a while to get.
And what happens if it doesn't go through? What happens if people do look up Nantucket wind blade or something, and they see the destruction of their summer tourism and think, well, 300 blades, if one comes off, it's going to look like this or worse, because these ones are going to be over 200 feet longer than the one in Nantucket. I mean, it's not like there's no risk to this, and there's 3 happened this year where blades have snapped and come off on that make.
Okay,
so
all right.
It makes you wonder.
Got to go. Thanks, Julian. Have a good weekend.
You too. Cheers.
It's 1:45 on Manx Radio. If you want to look, by the way, did you know Manx Radio has got its own YouTube channel? go to our website, go to manxradio.com. We've got YouTube, we've got everything there. And if you want to look at, G dropped a note in on 313 and just said, if you look at the Manx YouTube videos from 2016 to 2017, Ray Helmer's on there answering questions about the Liverpool docks design and planning and future freight carriage and what have you. So take a look at that. More messages in, and one concerning this was, it was Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. And she just said, I've heard you talking about newspapers on the Isle of Man and saying that newspapers are going to go. I think that's unfair. I think the newspapers on the Isle of Man will be here for years to come. Shelley, I'm right with you. The longer we keep our newspapers on the Isle of Man Examiner, the Manx Independent and the Courier, the longer we keep them, the longer, the better. For information, public service, for civil discussion, we need the newspapers on the Isle of Man, Shelley. The point I was making is that I do hope people purchase newspapers on the... In fact, I would urge you to buy newspapers. The problem is, systemically, existentially, newspapers, physical newspapers, are going out of business. And I just hope that we hold off that inevitability for as long as possible on the Isle of Man, so that our newspapers will remain on sale, employing journalists, employing people who put content together. So, Shelley, go out and buy a newspaper. Newspaper circulation in the Western world, particularly in the British Isles, is absolutely tanking. It's going down. Sometimes 10% per year, which means within 8-9 years, some newspapers will just be gone. I hope, I pray indeed, that our colleagues at the newspapers keep their jobs as long as possible and our newspapers stay available to be purchased and read.
No matter how much you need to dig or how much you want to dump, Fox Group Isle of Man offer an extensive range of plant hire, long-term lease and sales. We're the island's exclusive supplier for Louis Gong excavators with immediate delivery. Our machinery comes with a complete service package with finance plan options. Call John on 458946 to discuss your plant needs. Fox Group Isle of Man, part of the Fox Group of companies.
Can you be sure your health and safety needs are covered? If not, do you have a good company lawyer? A training course for your staff with St John Ambulance could make a difference to someone's life in the workplace or beyond. Working and managing safely, risk assessment, fire marshal, moving and handling, and a whole raft of first aid courses are on offer. Discover how St John Ambulance can help keep your staff safe and keep you within the law by calling 674 387. That's 674 387 to help make a difference to someone's life.
What are you doing in there?
I'm training for the Isle Listen Tough Mugger. I'm in it to win it this year.
Oh, aye? And how's sitting in me cow trough going to help you?
I'm acclimatising myself, toughening up my mind and my body.
Does it work?
Oh, aye.
Right, move over. Register now for Isle Listen's Tough Mucker. #MoreThanMud. This advert is brought to you by Island Escapes and your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Sunday Chill Out.
Hi, this is Chris Pearson from The Chill Out Show. On Sunday 22nd September, we'll be marking the end of summer with a live outside broadcast from the Cafe at the Sound between 6 and 9. Why not come and join us for some fantastic sunset views over the Calf for the autumn equinox? With drinks and chilled out tunes, the night is free, but we'll be raising cash for the Isle Listen charity. The Chill Out Show live from the Cafe at the Sound from 6 on Sunday 22nd September.
Flocking to the sea.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Well, Faster Mike, good afternoon. We're getting offshore wind farms no matter what. And like the Sea Terminal in Liverpool, the cost is going to be a similar situation. The price will go up and up, says Des. And by the way, that's what pubs are for, getting all the skeet. Well, the thing is, the offshore wind farm will be paid for by Ørsted. They're just going to rent our seabed. That cost is going to be theirs. And then obviously they'll harvest the electricity and flog that into the UK grid. We'll get some back, but whether or not we'll get a discount on it, we don't know, Des. But and you're quite right about the pubs as well. So, yes, look for YouTube, look for the previous infrastructure ministers, and they'll tell you all about it, what's happening in Liverpool. If you buy both local papers, it will cost you £3.90 per week. £200 a year is quite a lot in my book, says 457. Well, depending on what you want to spend your money on, really. I mean, if you think a cup of coffee is going to cost you £3, so £3.90 per week for newspapers. And, of course, because of the 2 paid-for newspapers, you get a free one as well. So I'll be honest with you, I implore you, buy newspapers, because when the newspapers go, and they will, it will be too late to complain. The existential threat to newspapers, I don't know whether you listen, when we take Mannin Line out to the schools, go out to all the high schools at least a couple of times a year, and I chat to the pupils, to the 16 and 17-year-olds. You may have heard me say, do you buy a newspaper? Nobody does. Nobody under the age of 40 buys a newspaper, bar a few exceptions. So if they're not buying, and please don't tell me it will go online, because it's still got to be sourced and written by a trained journalist. And at the moment, everything that's online from newspapers is written by journalists. So if in the future we don't have journalists sourcing stories and finding out, what do we tell? Oh, Catherine said, look, you've told us all about the podcast being listened to all over the world, so can the public find some pleasing, happy things to comment on and encourage people to come here? Don't frighten them away. Catherine, have a think about it. Phone me on Monday with something pleasing and happy. We don't get the courier delivered anymore, says Jane in Tramode. Realistically, wind farms are the best way forward, says Big John in Ramsey. Look at the meteorological reports. Location-wise, Ørsted is geographically is perfect. And he made for, do you remember we had Dave Quirk on a wee while ago, who said the wind in Ørsted is world class. Do you know how many wind turbines the ferry passes when sailing, and is any of the electricity produced coming to the Isle of Man? Well, I would say it is, Tam. It is going to be coming, but not directly. It will be going, Ørsted will be tapping into the Walney wind farm in Morecambe Bay. Huge wind farm there. So that's going into the UK grid, and they've talked about a second interconnector. At the moment, we have one interconnector, goes from Bispham in Blackpool to just below Manx Radio, Port Skillion, at the bottom of Douglas Head. They're talking about another one coming from Preston to... And if you look at the map on the little booklet they handed out, it comes in just around Groudle. I don't think it'll be anywhere near Groudle Railway, but possibly a little further on, possibly towards Housestrake. So we will be getting, we can source UK electricity anyway. We do through the interconnector. We'll just have a second interconnector, but I'm assuming that that's going to be contingent on Ørsted getting the ability to rent our seabed and harvest the wind through those enormous wind turbines. We should be called Magic Island, says Andy, because we make everything disappear. Keith Kay says, Andy, regarding tourism on the Isle of Man, why is there still no waiting room for bus passengers at Ronaldsway Airport? If the weather's bad, everybody crams into that little bus shelter that holds about 6 people. It's not civilised. That's it. Have a great weekend. Thanks to Howie Kane on the phones today. Back on Monday, open line at 12 midday.
WINT. 60 years serving you as the nation station. This is Manx Radio.
This island has, in centuries gone, produced its share of wordsmiths and artists and poets.
One modern poet was taken much too soon from us, but Paul Lebezinski produced lyrical and politically hard-hitting verse, easy on the ear and many telling a story.
The first poem is based on an old Manx novel which I have tried to adapt and made into a poem. This poem is called Molly of the Southlands Fair. 'Twas in a year long passed away, when man's fair isle lay verdant green. Summer grew poppies in the hay, gold autumn's harebells danced the lane, that wandered to a fresh-turned field, where, flaxen-headed, bronzed in sun, hard with his plough a farmer toiled, as Simon Fannin he was known. Erect, rod-straight as northern pine, religious of a studious mind, with eyes blue as the swirling brine that dashed his coastlands with the tide. Of English scholars he had read, and as he tilled old pastures new, he aired the verses from his head to screaming gulls that swooping flew in search of spoils and true love's tale. Often they heard him tell aloud. With joyful heart he could not fail to cease and watch the dusky shroud of purple mist cloak emerald hills. Then to the birds proclaim of her, she reason for his work and wills, sweet Molly of the Southlands Fair. Sharing those moments, o'er the miles, in Ballasala's fragrant lea, the loveliest of man's fair isle lay reading 'neath her favoured tree, that grew so stout with roots as strong as held the love bond of this pair, she happy in his heart a song one evening of the sun's last fire, where silent but for gushing stream, in glen's deep honeysuckle gloom, each pledged to each fulfilling dreams watched kindly by Mannin's moon. Unknown to them, some miles away, in Douglas town's dark street of thieves, Caneen the lawyer, hunched and grey, scratched with his quill on ledger's leaves. Plotting he cackled into the night, drinking by candle flame in his den, thirsting for ruthless power and might to wield across his fellow men. Especially Fannin, tall and bold, Caneen would crush without a care the one she blessed with love untold, sweet Molly of the Southlands Fair.
Part of island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.